Okay, I think we're going to begin now. We've already had our call to order. We've had a closed session. So I just want to thank everybody for coming out again. I believe the superintendent will have some comments.
Good evening, everyone. Just want to start with a couple thank yous and recognitions. This past weekend, we had a fundraiser at the Windsor Athletic Club for Send Hunger Packing. For those that do not know, Send Hunger Packing is an organization that works within our community in partnership with Mercer Street Friends. Many thanks to Melissa Hauger for taking the lead on supporting our students with food insecurity, families that qualify at the K-5 level for free and reduced lunch. There's over 170 students that qualify, of which approximately 150 students participate in the program. And what it does is they send weekend bridge meals to families on Fridays. So that translates to 40 weeks, 150 students, approximately 6,000 meals going home. Those meal packages include 2 breakfasts, lunch, and dinners. So it does provide a bridge for an entire weekend for families. So just complete credit to them for the work that they're doing, and thanks and appreciation for the support of our children. Also wanted to say thank you to Attitude in Reverse, Kurt and Tricia Baker, and the work that they're doing around supporting mental health awareness and suicide prevention. Again, a big fundraiser and walk this weekend. We also had the Innovation Fair, and thanks to the Ed Foundation for the work they did in supporting over 1,000 students being involved in the Innovation Fair, and members of the Board of Education that were out as volunteers as well as in support of them this weekend. And just yesterday, our High School North and High School South student green teams held a green fair at High School South, working together North and South. So a lot of great things happening within our schools and in our community. And just one point of note, there was a press release issued by West Windsor Township on Thursday last week from the Office of the Mayor regarding the sale of Transit Village. So in case that wasn't caught by folks, and I have not yet seen it in the paper, it announced the sale of Transit Village to Avalon, a corporation that has other properties in town, is a very well-known, well-respected developer, and they have agreed to the purchase and development of 800 units in our community. Part of the agreement was the increase in affordable housing from 100 units to 132 units. So there will be that sale, I believe, was on the Township Council meeting agenda last night. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, and now we're going to have Dr. Adel give us a presentation on the athletic program review.
All right, good evening. Again, welcome and thank you. I've been told I'm too verbose and have too many slides, so I tried to get this to a reasonable number for this evening. This past year, we've had an athletic program review, athletic task force take place. It was representative of members of our school community. Before I get into the breakdown of the group, I just want to say it also ties directly into our strategic plan goal number 3. Again, recognizing that children need to balance physical, social, emotional, and academic needs, will maintain a supportive culture and build structures for the health, safety, and well-being of the whole child. We actually have a athletic department mission statement that had been created by our coaches and our athletic directors years gone by, and then revised by a committee of coaches and our former athletic director, Jean Marie Seal. And it says the mission of West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District's athletic department is to pursue excellence by promoting an environment of teamwork, sportsmanship, and commitment that teaches self-confidence, discipline, and problem solving on and off the field. So that is our grounding. The committees included coaches, students, parents. Parents included Booster Club members, PTA, PTSA representatives, liaisons from our local rec programs and our club programs, and members of our administration. I want to thank Dennis Lepple, John Dauber, Shauna Carter, Lamont Thomas, and Ken Mason for participating in all of the committee meetings as administrators representing their respective schools. We have a couple members of the athletic task force here this evening, a couple of the parent representatives. And as we went through, we added members to try to create an increased feedback loop throughout. So as we worked to network with some of the rec programs, we added them into the process all the way through, including right up until the last meeting a week ago. where as word spread, we invited more folks into the process so that, even if they were there for the first time, they could pick apart the implementation plan we were working on and give us feedback that way. Some of the goals were to review the philosophy of youth sports and our mission statement, to create a set of actionable recommendations, reviewing the strengths of our athletic program, areas needing attention, communication, looking at participation rates by season, by team, by injury data, looking at staffing levels, looking for student and parent feedback through the process. Some of the recommendations that came out of the process really centered around 4 themes. Communication was the absolute #1 recommendation that continued to cut across all feedback that we had, and it showed up in lots of different ways, from how we announce teams to how we recruit through the system to how new families find out about our athletic programs to how we communicate about expectations, how we communicate about team rules, how rules may be different by season, by teams, by level. So you name it, arrows were pointed at communication through the process. And this does not mean that we have figured it out. This means that this is an absolute actionable recommendation that we need to take proactive steps on. There was also the idea of opportunity, and I'll get into what some of those opportunities are in personnel and engagement within our community. So regarding communications, again, increase community outreach, increase communication between high school, middle school, and elementary. A lot of families, so sometimes when we brought the PTA, PTSA representatives into the process, it was absolutely eye-opening to see individuals that when it was their first child, they didn't see the through line through the youth sports program to the high school and to see the impact. So because we don't have youth volleyball in elementary school, there were parents that had their kids in maybe soccer association or in baseball or t-ball, and they would say, wait, the district has a volleyball program? Where would we ever learn about that? If I wanted my child to be involved in it, how would I even find out? And then to come to find out our calendar is even separated between our school calendar and our athletic calendar. That even how we communicate about how you access information for the district needs to be completely thought about differently. And again, it really, the idea of creating bi-monthly communications was raised by the task force. The task force had approximately 30 to 50 parents and representatives, administrators, at almost every meeting. So the group was diverse in thought and united in purpose. The idea that we have to do some things differently as a system if we're going to change the trajectory of youth sports and ultimately to high school athletics. That does not mean that we're having some amazing results at certain levels and in certain sports, but there are other programs that are struggling. And the question becomes, what can we do about it as an organization? And some of it are the decisions we've made in this room. Now, not necessarily the same board members, but decisions back in 2009, 2010 for the 10-11 budget had a significant impact on participation rates for a group of students over a 6-year period. And that was back with the old economic tsunami where the budget cuts came into place and the loss of state aid came into place. So the decisions we make have long-term consequences sometimes. The idea of highlighting videos of athletic programs and scholar athletes and featuring alumni, one of the things that was remarkable was the number of parents of graduates that had students playing college ball, one way or another. Now it was either Division II or Division III, not a lot of Division I, although there was some examples of Division I, but that they were pursuing a sport in college, and some of that athletic pursuit helped them in entrance to college. That doesn't mean that go jump into athletics so you can have a ticket to college, but it does mean that colleges were looking for students that could contribute to their campuses. And parents talked about the impact on their child and their development on the college level and the feeling that their voices could be shared as a reason to promote athletics. And so I believe it's tomorrow night, there is going to be a panel of alumni, I believe it's at North, that the North Booster Clubs have helped organize with Lee McDonald, the Director of Guidance, to help present some of this. So we've already started to take some steps in this area. The idea of spirit and hype days. Now this has been, the feeling that came out of the students was they're not supported by their peers, and that they felt that oftentimes the other teams, if the students are interested in athletics, they're on another team. So when it comes to who's in the audience or the stands to support them, oftentimes the stands are pretty thin. And so they felt that they're almost playing for a school, and the school doesn't care about what is not representative of them and coming out, even when they make the playoffs. So the question to the principals and ultimately the school becomes, what can we do to help build spirit? And the recommendation from some members of the task force was, you got to do things to help build excitement around spirit, and that can also be with academics as well. But the focus of this committee, remember, was athletic task force. And then sports information days, the idea of making sure we're getting the word out at different levels, making sure that we're actively promoting in the idea of sign-up, talking about decisions that were made in the area of communication to a T. Every rec program said the minute we went to virtual backpack became the death of some of the sign-ups because it was harder. Families just are not clicking on the links through the virtual backpack. And because the flyer doesn't come home, they felt their participation rates immediately took a nosedive based on the one decision around saving paper. Now, I don't have a great, the solution is either send the paper home or stay with the virtual backpack, but we know that it had an impact on participation. Engagement. Again, improving that communication with the rec departments is really important in continuing the work of building a relationship with not only the rec department as in the rec heads, but actually the rec programs, all the representatives of the youth sports programs. So we've talked about having like an ongoing rec council or an ongoing sports council where we meet on an ongoing basis, and that we start promoting, again, helping with the through line. One of the things that was done as a result of some of this conversation, and unfortunately it was rained out, was there was a coordination within our baseball programs and our high school sports programs in order to build a community day where the North-South traditional day with rec sports playing before the North-South game and trying to partner up rec teams with the varsity club and the middle school programs. The development of relationships with high school sports in elementary and middle school. Some of this got into this idea of adopting a team where classes and or grade levels and or schools adopted a team and you tried to build relationships between a team and a teacher or a team and a group of students, whether that became Read Across America Day, whether it became volunteering, whether it became going down to PE classes and showcasing a specific sport. The importance of students seeing other students and role models to look up to get a sense of what these sports are. Community involvement, again, I talked about briefly Let's Play, but this idea of initiatives and branding around promotion of athletics. The youth programs felt strongly that they needed to promote amongst the kids. And again, this is not just a task force. When we talked about task force, it's not all actionable steps for the board. It's also talking about like how do we help the youth rec programs and how do we work in partnership with them. So the Let's Play theme is something that we can help carry, but it's also something that our rec programs and our rec leagues need to help carry. Promoting athletic events through involving the website and social media. A lot of feeling that we could get community involvement by promoting ourselves better through different mechanisms. Renewing our commitment to engage in positive school spirit. I've talked about that already, but it shows up here in community involvement. And making sure that as we're working on the program review for health and PE, that we're thinking about where sports are introduced throughout elementary, middle, and high school, and how we're reinforcing sports that are played within our school district at those different levels. Then the question became, how can we then leverage the athletes to help come in as maybe guest speakers or to help showcase, and again, so that students build connections and understand what the sports at the secondary level look like. When it came to community involvement, again, sports days and events, the idea of intramural clubs and teams, trying to find ways that our rec leagues could help maybe work through community education to promote after-school intramural clubs or intramural opportunities, ways in which to connect students where the students already are, offering clinics and after-school events and summer camps, working with the rec department on shared initiatives, and again, creating that standing athletic committee, something where we no longer say that it's rec's department to try to figure out how to involve the youth, and we pick them up in the middle school for the sports that we have. If we want to ensure the health of our long-term team sports specifically at the secondary level, we're going to need to make sure we're working in partnership with our rec partners, with our independent leagues that are in town that are not associated with rec. Not every program is a rec program. Some are not. And there's all different sports that have different structures. And there is no current comprehensive list of every sports program in this community. So one of the challenges we walked away with out of the last meeting was making sure that we have that. And you think that it existed, but again, not every program exists through rec. So there are a lot of independent leagues. On the personnel side, The committee recommended strongly that we put some kind of guidebook and guidelines together around expectations, curriculum, retention, recruiting, player development plans, integration K-12, roles and responsibility, professional development for our athletic program. It's going to require bringing committees of folks together should this recommendation move forward. On the personnel side, we talked about the importance of professional development for our coaches. We have approximately 120 coaches, positions throughout the year, of which we turn over around 50 coaches a year. There's lots of reasons for that. Not all our coaches are district coaches, our district staff members. So you have a lot of out-of-district coaches that coach for a year or two and don't have long-term commitments. You also have folks that are trying to break into the profession that coach, and then they might land a job in another district. You also have the fact of coaching salaries, so that's a contractual issue. One of the things on our coaching salaries are amongst the lowest in the county. So sometimes our coaches move to other districts for higher salary compensation, and it's just a reality of our construct. Recruitment of coaches is critical, but one of the coaches who's a first-year teacher said that in his first year he had received the 4 days at the beginning of the year, the 1 day at the end of the year, mentoring days throughout the year. But when asked about how much professional development he received to be a first-time coach, he said none. He had received no training to be a first-year coach. So what he was coaching based on his idea of what it meant to coaching versus an athletic direction or belief structure that we've imparted upon our coaches and ingrained in them about this is what we do as a West Windsor-Plainsboro coach. This is how you run a practice plan. This is how you work with parents and families. This is how you think about playing time. This is how you communicate to your team. These are the tools and structures that you use. That wasn't there for him, so he learned from other coaches the best he could with those that would give him the time to help coach him in the sport he was in. So in the area of professional development, we think there's a whole lot of things that we can do to support our coaches, and ultimately that will in turn support our students and our families and our teams. When it comes to personnel, this board approved in the 18-19 budget the growth of 22 assistant coaches. This brings us back to the levels that were cut in 9-10. It doesn't necessarily talk about expansion beyond that. It brings us back to pre-budget cuts in 9-10, or the 10-11 budget. There are sports here that will ultimately, they've been budgeted in. The enrollment will ultimately dictate whether these all get filled. So just because we budgeted doesn't mean they all get filled. And remember, we already have a 50 staff turnover a year out of 120 coaches. Now you're adding 22 more positions to hire. So one of the difficulties is hiring and making sure that we have district staff. Because we can, and again, if you do not have district staff that are interested in coaching, you can hire outside staff that are sub-certified and or teacher credentialed from other districts and or community members that have substitute credentials. Once they go through interview process, they've been vetted and they're board approved. There are other sports we're going to have to watch based on numbers. Track is one of those sports that always has rising numbers because track's one of the few sports that does not have cuts. So if we want to make sure that we're maintaining participation, we're going to need to then look at coaching ratios with our track teams in particular. Other recommendations that came out was this idea of recognition, our student athlete recognition around everything from academics for our teams, like academic GPA of teams, students that are performing at a high academic but also on teams. There was a feeling that came out through different forums that the value of academics wasn't always reinforced through the athletic program. And there definitely is an inherent conflict that comes into tutoring, that comes into SAT preps, that comes into evening coursework and practice schedules. And so there's definitely frustration that exists for parents as well as for coaches and definitely students in the middle when it talks to, you know what, the tutor's only available on Tuesday afternoons at 5 o'clock, and the student saying, but practice goes to 5:30, and you know I'm being asked to leave at 4:30 to get to tutor. Like, so those kind of conflicts permeated through conversations. Again, don't have a firm answer on that, but we have to recognize the conflict exists, and the students were definitely feeling the pressure of the balance between the multiple forces that they're working through. When asked if alternate practice schedules or differentiated types of practice schedules should be considered, the students very quickly went to, we want to be competitive as a team, and taking our practice time away doesn't work either, so that's not a solution. Again, the student athlete recognition was team-based, it was academic focused, It was also focused on team awards, team wins, but doing more publicly around our athletic teams. There were feelings that we have winning teams that never even, like we're going state tournament tomorrow for a state championship in tennis tomorrow. Haven't heard of it much, right? So why is that? We have such an award-winning team, a team that's doing incredibly well athletically. What can we do to promote those teams so that the community knows about some of the excellence that's happening out there in the athletic program? Then in the idea of recognition was this idea of adopting a team. Adopting a team was a couple different ways. It was classroom to team, but it was also departmental to team, so that we could look at and it was also in season. So how could boys soccer support the cheerleaders? How could girls soccer promote this? How can teams recognize and support each other? Doesn't mean they have to come to all the games, doesn't mean they have to come to all the practices, but could you create moments of opportunity where teams can go out to support each other within the schedule? So those were things that parents talked about. What else can we do? Wellness and health was absolutely talked about throughout the program, just general health and wellness. I already talked about the second bullet. Creating opportunities for varsity athletes and coaches to speak with elementary students continually was reinforced. Developing relationships with rec continually reinforced. Creation of the sports board, wanted to reinforce that. Expanding opportunities for athletic programs. In that expansionary, talked about intramural clubs at the middle school for clubs that are high school-based clubs, teams, but don't have middle school teams. For instance, volleyball. There's a high school program, there's no middle school feeder. Could we do something in intramural there? Basketball has a lot of interest. Many of the students get cut as a result of over-interest in number of team seats or roster spots. The question became, could we run an intramural on the side in order to promote and keep students connected? Gym space is absolutely a conflict through all of this. So that's a recognition that we have to have, is that some of the expanded opportunities run into conflict with gym and facility space. Continued emphasis on sportsmanship. We win many sportsmanship banners, and our teams do a great job with positive values. Our kids do a great job with positive athletics and sportsmanship values. It's just continually reinforcing that, supporting those coaches, creating the intramurals. The staffing considerations was not just coaches, but there were conversations around the fact that administrative oversight is very difficult because the number of teams, the number of sites, the number of things that we're expecting one individual to do with 4 sites, over 30-something programs, 160-something, 120-something coaches, and the turnover. A day like today where we rain out in several of our games will take a whole day offline just to reschedule everything, let alone to do any other part of the job. And so there's some real question about administrative oversight and what we might need to do for the future. And the other question that was risen is around middle school training staff. We have athletic trainers at our 2 high schools. We do not have medical support at our 2 middle schools. So is there anything that we can do to help support our students from a safety perspective with respect to athletic trainers, or some level of athletic training support at our middle levels? And lastly, is just the contractual salaries. It's something that we need to be cognizant for future rounds of negotiation. But I did promise the coaches, because this is just not my task force, but I'm representing a larger group, I did promise that I would raise that as a point that was raised throughout the process. So the contractual salaries was something that, as we look at gaps across the county averages, is something that we have to be mindful of for the future. And that is the last slide. So any questions from the board? Rachel.
Thanks, David. So I was wondering, are there any opportunities that exist also to evaluate maybe sports that may have a high interest but aren't offered yet in our schools? Is that something that there's an opportunity?
So in this particular task force, we spent the vast majority of the emphasis looking at the sports that currently exist, especially within the NJSIA approved list of sports. However, there was a lot of discussion about, especially in the intramural conversation, about what do we do for sports such as pickleball, cricket, frisbee, sports that students have shown interest in, even talked to the principals about, but don't exist in any formal capacity through an NJSIA structure. And for the good of the camera, New Jersey Sports Interscholastic Athletic Association is the former governing body. So those sports don't exist within that structure. So the primary focus was looking at the sports that we have, but a definite conversation. When talking to the students that were representative on the committees were our current athletes. They weren't necessarily thinking in terms of athletic expansion. They were worried about their current teams. Our coaches were our current coaches for the current teams. So they weren't necessarily talking about how do we expand sports. They're worried about the development of the current team. But there was other feedback that showed itself in conversation with the parents in the evening task force meetings, where we did talk about how could we step into alternative sports that don't exist through the NJSI structure, and are there things we can start to do more to see if students, and a lot of that thought was around intramurals. And because right now in some of these sports there's no one to play, there's no clear guidelines about what the rules would be, no governing body, no referees, no set course design. I mean, there's a lot of work that would have to be done, but it was talked about.
So when you talk about or when you recommend creating intramural programs, that might be where some of those discussions can occur then in
It would
those?
be, but some of that also existed primarily around middle school intramural for sports that are either heavy on the cuts or that have high school varsity programs but no middle school program. And then a place we see future expansion into that would be potentially sports that don't currently exist through the NGSI structure at the secondary level, but maybe sports that students have interest in as places that we could potentially start talking about building. And when that was raised, it was raised with, there was some members of the committee that would never want to see that because they think it would deter resources, staffing, and away from existing sports. My counter argument would be if we go back into the mid-'80s, late '80s, when lacrosse came in. Lacrosse was feared by everyone of being the ultimate death of baseball. And it has definitely had an impact on the number of participants to baseball over the years in many communities. Not in all, but in many communities. But it was based on student interest. And I think what ultimately needs to drive what programs we have ultimately becomes what are the students most interested in participating in. Because if the goal is ultimately health and wellness, if students aren't interested in one sport, we need to think about changing course and putting our time, money, and energy into sports that students are interested in. So I'm a realist in that we need to be mindful of what the student interest is.
Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Can you explain a little bit more about what the sports board is that you have on here?
Well, the idea of a sports board is a representative body of booster clubs, recreation leagues, with administrators, athletic directors, and rec program working together in some kind of annual, meeting that's set up, whether it's monthly or every other month, that we're constantly coming back to revisit our goals as a community, not just as a school district, around athletic programs. It's very loosely defined at this point, and it needs a lot of work, but there was a collective interest in continuing the work of the task force, because by working together, we definitely have several shared initiatives that came out of it already, and we know that if we can create a more of a standing committee, we think that we can leverage the work together to help improve the rec participation rates, as well as has a direct correlation and impact to us in the future.
Okay, and one other question. Did anything come up about ways for players and perhaps parents to be able to give feedback to coaches without fear of retribution?
There was one recommendation that will show up in the actual chart of recommendations that I'll provide to the board in the future. And it is an anonymous feedback loop for end of the year feedback on experience, to try to give anonymous feedback to talk about how programs can be enhanced. It's a recommendation. It has not been acted upon at this point. But yeah, it did come up.
Okay. Thank you.
Hey, Dave, I got a question. Thank you so much. How many teams have we merged between high school north and south? I know hockey and football. What else?
From an athletic program standpoint, there are only two co-op teams entered by the Board of Education. One is hockey, as you mentioned. The other is football.
Okay,
At
thanks.
this point, there's no other sports. The co-op rules are very restrictive at the current point, in which sports such as baseball, which is having difficulty, especially at high school north, fielding a team for the future, had very much difficulty with this season, forfeited many games. I don't anticipate that the co-op rules will be changed in time for next spring. However, I'm sitting on the NJSAI task force for co-op rules. They've just approved rules to go to the executive, the full membership in December. which will fundamentally, if adopted, fundamentally change co-op rules to allow any sports at any level, under certain circumstances, the ability to merge. So in the future, should we have difficulty fielding teams at North and South, the process, if this new rule goes into place, starting in fall 19 forward, it would allow for a lot more flexibility. And that, quite frankly, is a direct result of the advocacy of this board and the administration, of the work of the North Booster Club for football in particular, and the representatives in our local constituent groups, Assemblyman Benson, Senator Turner, Senator Greenstein, and others for their work. So, you know, right now there's a lot of momentum to try to change the rules. So in the future, there may be further decisions to be made, but there's only two to answer your question.
Okay, thank you so much.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, now we'll have the first opportunity for public comments. The board invites thoughts and reactions on agenda items and items of concern from members of our community who are present. Each participant is asked to give his or her name and address prior to making a statement, which will be limited to 3 minutes. All statements should be directed to the presiding officer, and the public comment period will be limited to 60 minutes. Anyone? $59.5 minutes left. Okay, we'll close the public comments and go to committee reports. Administration and Facilities.
The Administration and Facilities Committee met on Tuesday, May 15th. Isaac Chang phoned in to participate for one agenda item, the ongoing discussion of Class 3 officers and school security. Following the presentation that was made by the superintendent and the West Windsor and Plainsboro police chiefs at our last board meeting, our conversation was focused on hiring, training, assignment practices, and the processes involved should the board decide to move this initiative forward. Louisa Ho and Rachel Giuliana joined us to discuss questions that arose at the last board meeting relating to Regulation 5600, Pupil Discipline Code of Conduct. Gerard Dalton shared information from other New Jersey school districts, as well as the New Jersey Code that references the requirements that New Jersey schools must follow for the Code of Conduct. The committee supports this regulation as written and made no changes from the last meeting. It moves forward for a second reading and board vote tonight. Dana Krug joined us while we reviewed some policies and regulations identified in a recent Strauss Esme alert and that are moving forward tonight for a first reading. Due to a change in state reporting requirements, we amended policy and Regulation 5350, Student Suicide Prevention, and Policy 8462, Reporting Potentially Missing and Abused Children. Policy 5533, Student Smoking, has been updated to include vaping implements such as Juuls. And Policy and Regulation 5561, Use of Physical Restraint and Seclusion Techniques for Students with Disabilities, has been amended to include some new definitions, some new guidelines around parent notification, and other new reporting requirements. We reviewed 2 new job descriptions. The Community Education Program Administrator description had some minor language changes to improve consistency based on the expectations of the job and the requirements for employment. And we have a new job description for a plumber. The committee reviewed the hourly and daily rate chart and supports 2 changes that are being recommended by the administration. The first change relates to long-term substitutes who would be moved to the contractual rate of a first-year teacher after the first 20 days. The rate change goes from $250 a day to $273 a day starting next school year. We also recommend and support the recommendation that to change the rate for substitute nurses. That'll be changing from $175 a day to $200 a day, which is consistent with neighboring districts. The committee supports the proposal from Rutgers Health University Behavioral Health Care to provide therapeutic support services to students and their families. The proposal would provide 2 full-time mental health clinicians for therapy, crisis assessments, and consultation with district staff at a cost of just under $226,000. And finally, the committee supports sending 2 administrators and 1 staff member to attend the 33rd Annual Educational Policy and School Law Seminar offered through Strauss Esme at a cost of $50. The A&F committee will next meet on Monday, June 18th.
Thank you. Any questions? Curriculum?
The Curriculum Committee met on May 14th. We reviewed the superintendent's recommendation to allow the research project program evaluation of the one-to-one technology device program to interview individuals within the district. All institutional review board protocols will be followed. Next, the committee reviewed and supported the summer professional development opportunities and curriculum projects. The committee also recommends approval of the revised job description for the teacher resource specialist for reading intervention. And the committee recommends the adoption of the following textbooks: Fundamentals of Physics. This is a textbook for the Advanced Topics in Physics Honors course. Exploring Environmental Science for the AP, which is for the AP Environmental Science course, and Pre-Calculus for the Pre-Calculus CP course. All of these are high school courses. The teachers who will be teaching these courses and the respective district area supervisors evaluated all the textbooks available at these levels and followed the established protocols for textbook adoption. Over 800 books from the Town Center Media Center will be disposed of since they are so outdated they no longer serve as worthy instructional tools. These will be disposed of in accordance with Regulations 7300.1, and the committee supports this. The committee recommends authorization for the 4th year of a 5-year agreement with the Middlesex County Regional Education Services Commission to provide administration of non-public funds for non-public school students within the district in accordance with the State Board of Education guidelines. The committee also recommends authorization of the following 1-year technology agreements with these 2 vendors. Exemplars Library to provide online resources for the district-wide K-5 math instruction from June 1st of this year to May 31st of next year at a total cost of a little over $9,000. Swivel to provide 100 pro team members licenses from July 1st of this year through June 30th next year at a cost of $4,750, $4,000, $750. West Interactive Services Corporation to provide Sharp School web hosting services for the 2018-19 school year at a cost of $5,562. 2 teachers advisors will accompany the middle school and high school students to National History Day at the University of Maryland in College Park, Maryland in June. The cost of the trip is not to exceed $1,328 per teacher, and the committee recommends approval of this travel. 3 teachers, 1 math teacher for AP Calculus AB, and 1 computer science teacher for AP Computer Science A, and 1 art teacher for AP Studio Art will attend AP Summer Institutes for professional development this summer, and the committee recommends approval of these professional development opportunities. Additionally, the Curriculum Committee recommends approval of the following professional development consultants: Handle with Care training, in the basic verbal and physical program to be held in September and October of this year. The total cost is $4,800 plus travel expenses for the instructor. Chris Hunninghake to provide a 4-day workshop on next generation science standards in September, and the total cost of that program is $4,200. In addition, the committee supports the approval of 1 teacher to be reimbursed for expenses related to obtaining responsive classroom training certification at a cost not to exceed $600. For the Star Talk Grant Hindi and Urdu summer program, the committee supports the approval of the consultants to provide services in relation to and funded by the 2018-19 Star Talk Hindi Urdu summer program. The committee recommends the approval of several overnight field trips, 1 for the High School North Technology Student Association to attend the TSA National Conference in Atlanta, Georgia in June. The cost of the trip is approximately $800 per student, and several High School South Model UN competitions to Princeton, University, Rutgers, University of Pennsylvania, Georgetown, and Cornell in the 2018-19 school year. Costs of these trips are from $300 to $400 per student per trip. And for the High School South cheerleaders to the National Cheer Competition in Orlando, Florida in February. The cost of that trip is approximately $970 per student. The committee will next meet on June 5th.
Any curriculum questions? Okay, Finance, Taylor.
Okay, the Finance Committee met on May 15th. The committee reviewed and supports the agenda items for the May 22nd Board of Education meeting, include the following: professional service rates, most unchanged, transfer of capital projects interest income, Aramark renewal, Advocate renewal, Sodexo renewal, lunch prices, 2018 to 19 procurement list, travel approval for NJASBO June conference. The committee also reviewed and supports the following agenda item, which will be on the June 12th meeting agenda: capital reserve resolution. The committee reviewed the renewal of employee insurance coverage for prescription, dental, and health care. If the district enrolls in a new health care plan, the resolution terminating our participation in the state health benefits plan will be on the June 12th. Will be on this June 12th board agenda for approval. Administration shared with the committee the benefits of utilizing a third-party administrator for 403B and 457 plans. The cost of this service will be borne by the investment companies and not by the district. Administration shared a few routine human resource items with the committee, including the reappointment of non-affiliated staff members and the renewal of hourly rates for substitute and part-time staff. Other business. The committee discussed the presentation given by Dr. Adholt and the township police officials at the May 8th board meeting concerning the use of Class 3 police officers in the school district. The committee also discussed the Maurice Hawk War Art and the upcoming contract with University Behavioral Health Care for student mental health service as contained in the budget. The committee will next meet on June 18th, 2018. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the finance?
I was just wondering if these are extensions of or renewals of contracts with Aramark and Sodexo, and I was just wondering if there are any conversations with them about their performance and if that's going to improve over the next year.
Yeah, as far as the Aramark contract goes, we've already seen improvements. We've made we've pushed for several administrative changes with personnel that deal with our account. We're already seeing the improvement in that. The Sodexo contract, which is for food service, we will see changes in personnel only because the one person is leaving, but our in-district person has increased communication with them, with the community, and with the students. So there's the food plan. It is much more comprehensive than it was just a year ago. What I mean by that is there's communications with the students, there's communications with parents, and because there's required committees, and we're running those now. So, it may take a little while to get to where, I don't know if we'll ever make everyone happy, but there'll definitely be an improvement with that communication process.
That's it? Okay, that brings us to the voting portion of the meeting. Can I have a motion on administration items 1 through 6? Martin and Isaac. Any questions or comments on the administration items? Chris?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Chang.
Yes.
Ms. Hertz. Ms. Ho, sorry, not here. Ms. Juliana.
Yes.
Ms. Krug.
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Ms. Case.
Yes.
Mr. Flares.
Yes. Curriculum, can I have a motion on items 1 through 10? Dana and Carol.
Can I have one correction to make?
Okay.
On 1C, pre-calculus, it states that the book's for pre-calculus honors. It's actually for pre-calculus college prep.
Okay. All right, any questions or discussion on the curriculum items?
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Hertz. Ms. Juliana.
Yes.
Ms. Krug.
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Mr. Cheng. Ms. Keish.
Yes.
Mr. Flares.
Yes. Finance, could I have a motion on items 1 through 27? Taylor and Rachel. Any questions or discussion on the finance?
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Juliana.
Yes.
Ms. Krug.
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Mr. Cheng. Ms. Hertz. Ms. Keish.
Yes.
Mr. Flares.
Yes. Okay, with personnel, we have a perfect storm of, I don't think we've ever done this before, have 3 association contracts coming for a vote on the same night. So I'm going to call them separately. First, can I have a motion on item 3, which is the administrator's contract? That'll be Taylor and Michelle. Any questions or comments?
The West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District Board of Education and the WWP Administrators Association have reached a tentative agreement for a new collective negotiations agreement. The Administrators Association is a professional association representing administrative positions, including principals and assistant principals and certificated supervisors. Last month, the agreement was approved by the WWP Administrators Association by an overwhelming majority. The successor agreement covers the period from July 1st, 2018 through July 30th, 2021. The salary increases for the 3 years of the contract are as follows. In year 1, 2.9%. In year 2, 2.75%. And in year 3, 2.65%. I recommend that the full board approve this contract.
Okay, any questions or comments? Chris?
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Krug.
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Mr. Cheng.
Yes.
Ms. Hertz. Ms. Juliana.
Yes.
Ms. Keish.
Yes.
Mr. Flares.
Yes. Okay, now we have item 4, which is the contract with the West Windsor-Plainsboro Education Association. Could I have a motion on that? Rachel and Martin. Oh, yeah.
So I am pleased to announce that the West Windsor-Plainsboro Regional School District Board of Education has reached an agreement to extend the current collective negotiation agreement with the WWP Education Association for 1 additional year. The Education Association is a union that represents teachers and all other employees who hold certificated non-supervisory positions. There are about 895 of these employees. If ratified, the 2016 to 2019 contract will be extended to cover the 2019-2020 school year. Last week, the extension was approved by the WWP Education Association and is being voted on right now. The agreement provides for a 2.90% salary increase for the 2019-2020 school year, caps the financial incentive that employees receive for waiving insurance coverage when they are covered by another family member's plan, and clarifies language in the contract to allow a smooth transition out of the school employee's health benefits plan. I recommend that the board vote to ratify the extension as its terms facilitate the containment of insurance costs as we transition out of the school employee's health benefits plan due to its unsustainable annual premium increases. Thank you.
Any questions?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Whitfield.
Yes.
Mr. Zhang.
Yes.
Mr. Cheng.
Yes.
Ms. Hertz. Ms. Juliana.
Yes.
Ms. Krug.
Yes.
Ms. Keish.
Yes.
Mr. Flares.
Yes. Okay, and last is, could I have a motion on the yellow personnel addendum, which is actually for the West Windsor-Plainsboro Service Association. Dana and Isaac. Rachel, you'd like to make a comment?
Sure. So hi, yes, we're happy to announce a collective negotiations agreement with the WWP Service Association. The Service Association represents instructional assistants, secretaries, bus drivers, bus aides, and cafeteria playground aides. Earlier today, the agreement was approved by the WWP Service Association by an overwhelming majority, and we will be voting upon it at tonight's meeting. The successor agreement covers the period from July 1, 2018 through June 30th, 2021. Some of the highlights of the agreement are the salary increases for the 3 years of the contract will be 2.9% in all 3 years. We've also adopted a 3-tier prescription plan that's going to be added as well. We appreciate how integral the contributions of the Service Association's membership are to the mission of the district. And we'd like to thank the members of the Service Association's negotiations team and the board's negotiations team for the productive and collaborative efforts they devoted to reaching an agreement. I believe the full board should approve this contract this evening. Thank you.
Any questions?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Zhang.
Yes. Yes, thank you, yes.
Yes. Mr. Chang? Yes. Ms. Hertz? Yes. Ms. Juliana?
Yes.
Ms. Krug?
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Flares?
Yes. Okay.
Just wanted to say thank you to two individuals in the audience, one at the table, Bruce Almastrelli, president of WWPEA, and his leadership with his organization for their mutual agreements and swift action in the last couple of weeks as we move to work on the 1-year extension. Also want to recognize Patrick Duncan, Special Assistant for Labor Relation, who was instrumental in bringing all 3 negotiated contracts forward in the 6 months that he's been with us in the school district. So amazing work in short order. Also want to recognize Jeff Kachese, a counsel for the Board of Education, who's at the table today, who specializes in labor relations and negotiations, and he was instrumental in 2 of the 3 agreements. But also to Dennis Leppold and Jeanette Jones, the presidents and their leadership teams for the Service Association and the Administration Association. We're very fortunate to have great relationships with our members and our association leadership, and it's because of relationships such as that we're able to bring forward those agreements this evening. I want to thank members of the Board of Education and all the committee work that you did and the time you spent in additional meetings in those negotiations as well. So a great team effort all around, and I think Tony said at the beginning, but truly unheard of to have 3 negotiations brought forward in one evening. At the same time, a major healthcare change for all representatives, or all covered members in the district. So a tremendous accomplishment that we shouldn't lose sight of tonight. So thank you to everyone.
Okay, and before we're going on, I'd like to also thank everyone involved, the board members, members of the association teams, and members of the administration. Typically, you think of negotiations as an adversarial process, but frankly, for the time that I've been involved in West Windsor-Plainsboro, there's been a spirit of cooperation, and everyone has their own goals. We settle them, and then we all move forward as a team. And I'd like to see that spirit continue, and I'm sure it will. All right, now the remaining personnel items. I need a motion on items 1, 2, 5, 6, the green addendum, and the pink addendum. Carol and Isaac. Any questions on the remaining personnel items?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Chang.
Yes.
Ms. Hertz? Yes. Ms. Juliana?
Yes.
Ms. Krug?
Yes.
Mr. Whitfield?
Yes.
Mr. Zhang?
Yes.
Ms. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Flares?
Yes. Can I have a motion on approval of the Board of Ed minutes from the 24th and the 8th? Martin and Taylor. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any liaison reports? Any new business? It's the second opportunity for public comment. 15 minutes will be provided at the end of the meeting for public comments. Each participant is asked to give his or her name and address prior to making a statement, which will be limited to 3 minutes. All statements should be directed to the presiding officer. Anyone?
John Hinsdale. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
John Hinsdale, 38 Quaker Road, West Windsor. At the last board meeting of May 8th, 2018, a presentation was given on the use of armed Class 3 officers in the schools. I'm sorry to see that our schools have become so unsafe as to require their presence. No doubt the response from some parents will be to move their children to safer schools where such measures are not necessary. But for those of us still here, for however long, I have 2 comments on that presentation. First, one of the slides said that the officers, quote, if authorized by chief of police, are permitted to carry a firearm, unquote. This implied strongly that officers may or may not carry firearms. But in response to a question from board member Hertz, the Plainsboro officer flatly stated, quote, they will be carrying a gun, the gun will not be concealed, unquote. Of course, this is no surprise. No reasonable person would expect that the officers legally authorized to carry firearms would not do so. So can we stop pretending it is at all discretionary and just come out and say they'll be armed? Then we can be mentally prepared for that. The board can be forthright about it, and it would be a nice gesture of recognition of our awareness. Second, there was a disconcerting reference to the officers being useful for incidents like breaking up fights, a centuries-old activity. This sounds like a classic disciplinary function that would be escalated. More troubling was the presenters asking rhetorically, quote, how many is too many and what's an acceptable number of fights? And the answer to that, no acceptable number of fights on school grounds, unquote. This language evokes the flawed and extreme zero-tolerance policies of the 1990s that gave inner-city districts their so-called school-to-prison pipeline. I never would have thought that this would be a concern here in West Windsor, but apparently the seeds of that failed philosophy may already be sown before these officers are even deployed. So those are my 2 comments. I don't make them to try to influence your course of action. I don't expect to be able to do that. I only make them so that down the road, as the ill effects of this unfortunate decision you're about to make present themselves, when I wonder, did I say anything against this back then? I'll be able to look back at the record of this meeting and know that I told you so.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Amashali, President of the Teachers Association. I'd like to take an opportunity to thank the board for their quick action. I know how quickly you moved when we asked that we move this forward for a Friday afternoon meeting. I'd also like to give a special thank to Patrick Duncan and also to Dr. Adderall who helped to entertain this idea. And I want to concur, Tony, with your remarks that we all have our goals, but then we move on to the greater goal, which is the education of our students in this district. So my extreme thanks to the board, who apparently you all must have served on some negotiations committee at some time in the last 3 months. So thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I'd like to make a motion, ask for everybody to make a motion to adjourn. Michelle and Taylor, those in favor of adjourning, say aye. Yes, we did. Yeah. And no one's opposed to adjourning, so we're adjourned. Thank you very much.